Hello, my name is April, and I have written some stories for my friends for Christmas, and I'm here to read one to you. Today I am reading Empathy, which is the story that I wrote for my friend Nick. The story of Nicholas, Aloft, Empath. Empathy. A breeze will always blow in the direction that it wishes to go. Fog clustered close to the tree trunks. The only sign of the sleepy sunrise was the flickering rays glowing through the gloom. The morning was still, no breeze disturbing the thick layer of delicate ferns covering the forest floor. Above, the branches reached for one another, embracing to form a nearly impenetrable canopy. All was silent. The forest was awakening, but Nicholas had already been awake for hours. Nicholas held his sturdy bow in one hand and pressed a roughened palm to the uneven bark of a tree with the other. He peered through the early morning gloom with a narrowed eye. The rest of the forest may not have felt the touch of breeze that wafted through the forest, but Nicholas did. He felt the fragile fingers of air that flickered across his face as he moved through the forest, sending the ferns whispering with his passage. He paused for a moment beside the tree, running a thumb along a ridge in the bark, deep in concentration. The surface of the tree seemed a landscape all its own, tiny canals for dried rivers and high ridges of hills. Nicholas was shaken from his thoughts, however, when something stirred in the brush before him. His instincts screamed for him to turn his head sharply, but he fought them. Only his eyes darted to the location of the rustling sound. After a moment that seemed to last an eternity, a delicate leg stepped from behind the tree and into Nicholas's view. It was covered in dirty golden fur, the hoof delicately cloven. Another leg followed the first, and soon the creature heaved its great bulk into sight. It was a massive golden stag. It was barrel-chested, muscles flexing under fur that darkened to black on its belly. A ruff of lighter golden fur, similar in tone to sunlight, shimmered around its neck. Its head was larger than Nicholas's, and its ears were rimmed in black. Nicholas swallowed, steadying his shaking hands. It was a forest monarch. Forest monarchs, known as brush kings in the ancient tongue, were as dangerous as they were beautiful. They had been known to take on fully grown Morrigan wolves without so much as a scar left upon their unbroken gold pelts. Their antlers were arm's length and shaped like flames leaping from their skulls, frozen in time. When caught in the rays of early morning sunlight, these antlers glowed like molten gold. Naturally, begging a forest monarch was the epitome of every hunter's career. With a steadying breath, Nicholas aimed his bow, notching an arrow. These arrows were straight as they came, with dark blue, light blue, and white feathers on the ends, and tape of the same colors wrapped around the ends, and marked these as Nicholas's trademark arrows. Empathy, the bow was named after the spell his friend April had inscribed upon the wood. Letting out his breath, Nicholas lined the end of his arrow so the point aimed directly at the forest monarch's chest. He felt a soft pressure against his wrist and glanced down. A soft glow was lit along the words inscribed upon the deer antler bracelet he wore, Ayat Oyo. At once he felt a familiar gentle tug at the head of his arrow. He gave in, allowing it to angle his shot to the very heart of the creature. He would get one shot, one slim moment before the monarch's acute hearing and forest sense betrayed his presence. Keen to take his chance, Nicholas pulled the string of his bow back. In the moment before he let the arrow fly, however, the monarch turned his great head and met Nicholas's eyes. Suddenly Nicholas found himself stricken with a great sense of presence. It seemed to tower over him, and he had the bizarre sense he had just entered the shadow of a great mountain. Goosebumps sprang up along his arms, and a chill trickled down his spine. For a moment Nicholas saw himself through the deer's eyes. He saw a gruff-looking young man in his early 20s, with the shadow of a dark beard at his jaw. Ruffled hair fell nearly into his eyes, which were gazing, stricken, toward the deer. It was definitely him. Same sky-blue satin vest with silver trim over a white shirt, same starch white boots with light blue tops, same incredible bow. He was stricken by how small the vision made him feel. He felt a sense not of panic or even fear, but of acceptance. He also felt the great sense of adoration toward the creature in his sights, and he was not certain if it was himself feeling it for the deer or the other way around. The deer held Nicholas's eyes for a long moment before its ear flicked. The connection was suddenly broken with Nicholas's loss of focus. As he lowered his bow to the forest floor and sank to his knees, the monarch turned and darted away into the forest, the brush rustling as it bounded away. Nicholas cursed under his breath as he rose to his feet again. He brushed the dirt and forest detritus from his rough black hunting pants before gazing in the direction of the deer had gone. He pondered for a moment if he should follow. He finally sighed again and returned his bow to his back. Turning his back on the encounter with the deer, Nicholas headed back toward Sentinel Village. Sentinel was a tiny village on the outskirts of a massive magical forest known as the Lumen Forest. Within that forest, the trees gave off a soft rainbow glow at night, almost as if fairies slept upon their leaves. In fact, rumors and fairy tales of just such a thing had made the rounds in the village many times. The village itself was made of ramshackle but comfortable homes and shops, where smoke puffed from every chimney during the coldest months. Sentinel served as the halfway point between the Lumen Forest and the harrowing journey to the country's capital, buried deep within the Starreach Mountains. Sentinel snuggled safely in the shadow of the Starreach Range, where the largest peak, God's Reach, seemed to touch the largest star in the sky. Aoyama, the star was called. The forests at the skirts of the Starreach Range were a favorite hunting spot. While the fauna in the Lumen Forest were vicious and unpredictable, the wildlife of the Starreach woods were much tamer. Nicholas had hunted in these woods for nearly his entire life, had learned every tree, every bush and stone, and he knew every mystery, every creature within. Or so he thought. For as the young man approached the edge of the forest, he heard a sound like a soft bell. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and for a moment he was surrounded by sun rays gleaming through the dissipating fog. "Why do you humans seek to destroy us?" The voice was gentle, questioning, and brought with it a sense of warm acknowledgement. Its bearer was not accusatory, nor even particularly interested in the answer Nicholas would bear. They were merely making a passive observation. Nicholas searched around for the source, and, finding none, he searched for the bow upon his back. Just as his fingers closed around the wood, however, the voice spoke again in his head. "See," the voice said, "how quickly you reach for your weapon when challenged. Why is that, I wonder? What are you so afraid of? You, who have tamed the very land you build your dens upon, who fish the very deepest of waters and penetrate the darkest of caverns. What is there left upon this earth to challenge you?" As the voice spoke, there was a soft rustling sound in front of Nicholas. He turned his head slowly toward the sound as a tree branch shook a bit, sending a few leaves spiraling toward the forest floor. To his amazement, a small light purple cat stepped out of a cluster of tree branches. It was a delicate thing, with a thin waist and small paws that barely placed pressure upon the branch it stood upon. It gazed toward him with prismatic eyes which glowed a soft rainbow. There was a single diamond-shaped jewel upon its forehead, which glowed with the same colors as its eyes. Its tail was forked. "I am Prism Cat," the creature said, answering Nicholas's unasked question. "Where did you come from?" Nicholas asked, casting a glance around. The cat tossed its head and flicked its ear casually. "Neither here nor there, though certainly not everywhere." Nicholas blinked. "That wasn't really an answer," he said flatly. "I believe I inquired of you first," the cat responded, lightly lowering its bottom to sit upon the tree branch and eyeing him thoughtfully. "Look," Nicholas said, finally releasing his bow and crossing his arms, eyeing the creature with suspicion. "If you're looking for an answer to your question, you're asking the wrong guy. I'm not a philosopher, I'm a hunter. Humans need food to survive, animals provide that food, so we hunt. I don't think it needs to get any more complicated than that." The prism cat gazed at him for a moment before lifting its paw and beginning to gracefully lick at it. Nicholas watched it for a moment before speaking again. "I don't think I've seen a creature like you in this forest." The cat paused mid-lick and gazed at him again, blinking slowly as though deep in thought. "I believe I could say the same of you." "You never answered my question. Where did you come from?" The prism cat lowered its paw to the branch again and nodded toward the right, deeper into the forest. "My dead mates and I were living in the heart of the forest," it said, with a slow flick of its tail, gazing in the direction it had nodded. "Where?" The cat flicked its tail again and looked back toward Nicholas. "There are bad men in the forest," it said slowly. "They have threatened us from our homes, sought our pelts and powers, and the cat was cut short. Nicholas stepped back, horrified, as an arrow blossomed from the cat's chest as though it had sprung from the cat's skin itself. A glittering silver stream blossomed at the point the arrow had struck. As the cat's legs shivered and it began to fall, the silver smeared across the branch of the tree upon which it had been perched. Nicholas let out a cry and took a step forward, arms outstretched, but another set of arms in stretched black fabric reached from the brush and caught the creature. Nicholas was baffled for a moment with how tiny the creature seemed in the mass of arms, before the man stepped from the brush and loomed over him, grimacing menacingly. Nicholas took a step back and narrowed his eyes. "Olgrif," he hissed behind clenched teeth. The towering man was easily a head and shoulders taller than Nicholas. His face was flat and wide, his nose crooked from multiple breaks. He had a jagged scar along one cheekbone. One eye was piercing red, the other slate gray. His skin was the color of leather. He had a wide chest the size of 2 shovel heads, with a tree branch thick arms. Unfortunately, his brain wasn't as dense as his muscle, and when he spoke it was with sly intelligence. "Well, well, well," Olgrif grunted, adjusting his grip so he was holding the perished prism cat by the scruff of the neck. Silver smeared his arm, sparkling morbidly in the early morning light. "I think that was just about enough out of this little pretty, don't you?" Nicholas narrowed his eyes and began reaching for his bow again, but Olgrif held up a hand. "Well, no, you don't, you little punk." He snapped his fingers, and with a flutter of activity and the shivery sound of arrows being drawn to bows, Nicholas realized he was surrounded by Olgrif's men. "I should have guessed you were the one behind this as soon as the cat said there were criminals in the forest," Nicholas snapped. "Well, maybe not, since it didn't mention they were ugly." Olgrif sniffed. "You get on my nerves, punk," he growled. "I could kill you, you know." Nicholas cast a glance around. He could see the sunlight glinting off the heads of the arrows, all pointed uncomfortably towards his chest. Taking a deep breath, he tried to regain his calm, despite the thundering of his heart. He plastered a collected smile upon his face. "Aw, you'd kill an old friend so soon after we reunited?" he said. "That's a little rude, don't you think?" Olgrif let out a hearty guffaw. "Nothing would give me more pleasure," he snarled, staring down his nose at Nicholas. "You've been a thorn in my side for longer than I should have allowed." Nicholas narrowed his eyes, momentarily forgetting the arrows pointed at him. "I've been a thorn in your side?" he snapped. "Turn around, buddy, because I think you need to do a 180. He pointed at the prism cat in the huge man's heavy fist. "That cat was one of the last of his species," Nicholas spat, disgusted. "It was worth more alive, and now, thanks to you, another important piece of this ecosystem is gone. Wouldn't be the first time, though, would it?" Olgrif's grip on the cat tightened as he glared warningly at Nicholas, but the younger man continued, unburdened by the hatred flaming in the taller man's eyes. "No," Nicholas continued, staring Olgrif down defiantly. "I seem to remember the last time I had to see your ugly mug, I was stopping you from robbing a mermaid clan of their pet lotus fish." Olgrif tightened his other hand into a fist, and Nicholas knew this was his moment. With startling speed for a young man of his size, Nicholas darted forward before the other men could even react. Taking a deep, airy breath, Nicholas shouted, "Empathy!" With a crack like gunfire, there was a blast of wind which erupted from around Nicholas in a fierce orb. The men strewn about the area let out howls as they were thrown back, their weapons flying, limbs askew, backs hitting trees. Nicholas didn't even stop to survey his work. Olgrif, too, was tossed back against a tree, his back smacking the bark painfully, arms spread. The mountainous man relinquished his grip on the prism cat, and Nicholas seized it from the ground as he darted past, the whistle of arrows shrieking around him as Olgrif's other men finally caught up to their senses. He ducked and rolled through a brush, hugging the deceased prism cat to his chest. When he was clear on the other side, he ran, barely looking where he was going. He could hear the moment Olgrif's men gave chase, and he knew they would catch up to him within moments. He began casting his eyes around for a place to make a stand, and finally he found one. Altering his course through the foliage, he climbed up a small hill overlooking the brush where Olgrif's men emerged. Nicholas held the prism cat in one arm and eyed the men. They were all easily twice his size, and he knew he could stand long in a head-to-head fight. As Olgrif himself erupted from the brush, fury etched on every line of his face, Nicholas gave a small grin. I have the high ground now, Olgrif, he said with a smirk. Olgrif gnashed his teeth and pointed at Nicholas. His men followed suit, raising their weapons toward the young man. Get down here, you coward, Olgrif snarled, so I can tear every limb from your body, one by one, and finally be done with you. Nicholas pretended to think about this for a moment before shrugging. If you insist, he said, before stepping into the void of air off the edge of the hill. He felt himself begin to fall, and he reached with his open hand to draw his bow from his back. He aimed at the ground and felt the wind rush around his bow as the spell etched upon the wood glowed. Empathy, he barked again, letting a single arrow fly. There was another eruption of wind, and suddenly arrow-shaped blasts of wind began pelting the men on the ground. Some of them managed to let arrows fly before they were pierced with the wind, but the gusting arrows broke the wooden ones in bursts of wood shavings. Olgrif's men were knocked back by the wind, and as Nicholas propelled himself safely to the ground, his boots landing with a soft thump, the men turned and raced into the underbrush, knowing they were soundly outmatched. Only Olgrif remained, and he pointed a single meaty finger at Nicholas as he turned toward the brush. I'll be back for you, you punk, he snapped before turning and following his men into the forest. Looking forward to it, sweetie, Nicholas smirked, waving after the men as they disappeared into the sun glowing through the trees. There you go, buddy, Nicholas said, standing and brushing the dirt from his pants. Before him was a small mound of freshly dug dirt. A line of flowers, freshly plucked and relocated, rose from the front of the grave. Nicholas gazed down at the grave for a moment before he heard a soft noise. Looking around, he pressed a hand to his bow once again. He dropped it when a tiny light purple creature wobbled out of the brush to rest upon the grave, curling its forked tail around itself and gazing up at him with wide rainbow-colored eyes. He just came out of hiding, just like that, Miriam, Nicholas's ginger-haired fiancée, said later. The flames of the fireplace in Miriam's healing wound flickered warmly over her skin as she tickled the tiny prism kitten's belly. The kitten mewed and happily, and the rainbow colors in its eyes flashed as it pawed happily at her fingertip. She giggled, bubbly. Yeah, Nicholas grunted from where he stood across the room, washing the streams of silver from his clothes. I'm not sure if that's what the cat meant by dimnates, but I knew it had to have something to do with it, and I couldn't just leave it where it was. Miriam rubbed the kitten's belly and looked up, smiling brightly. Can we keep it? Of course. Not like it's got anywhere else to go. Thank you for listening.